In this multimodal response journal, I will attempt to answer the following 2 questions, both of which have been on my mind since I started doing work for this course. Why might it be so important to address multiliteracies in the classroom? And why do you think they are often neglected or underutilized? Beginning with the first question, multiliteracies is about being literate in more ways than just the paper and pencil. Yes, I can recognize words in the English language, I can read and understand them when written on a piece of paper, and I can write in such a way that communicates my ideas to others. It dives deeper than that. It's about understanding the motivations behind the words we read and write, realizing that everything is part of a larger system at work. It's also about being able to interpret nonverbal or unwritten signs that implicitly hold meaning. Finally, it's about comprehending the whys and hows behind words and ideas, not just the whats. According to Kress, the meaning of any event or of any structure does not lie in the meaning of one sign, but has to be seen in the complex meanings of a set of signs all read together. Recognizing that these signs are made up of much more than just letters strung together into words makes it obvious how important it is for students to be able to read, recognize, and interpret these signs as they go through daily life. A Pedagogy of Multiliteracies by the New London Group explains how important it is to build learning conditions that lead to what they describe as full and equitable social participation, describing how dramatic global and economic change requires students to be equipped with certain key skills that traditional schooling might neglect to address. Some of these skills include adapting to constant change, innovating, being creative, meta-learning or thinking about and monitoring one's own learning, and critiquing and helping to change systems of inequitable empowerment. One often overlooked aspect of classrooms is being able to recognize and highlight differences between students in terms of backgrounds, opinions, and experiences, in order for there to be a balance of viewpoints that is similar to what one might see in the real world outside classroom walls. This not only includes valuing what students bring to the table personally, but also by intentionally integrating different types of materials into classrooms that better reflect the diversity found outside of them. This type of learning is highlighted in the University of Michigan's article about working toward third space and content area literacy. Another way to necessarily prepare students for life outside of schools is by incorporating different aspects of technology like blogs, wikis, smart boards, image manipulation, website design, video creation, and so forth, into everyday learning experiences. Basically what I'm saying here is that multiliteracies highlights real life in terms of who we are as people, and in terms of how far we've come with our tools and technology, allowing what is taught in classrooms to better reflect the reality occurring outside of them. Multiliteracies is truly a pedagogical shift, one that's about being able to function within a society that could use more producers than consumers, one that should be able to rely on schools as places that craft those producers because students are co-creators of knowledge and they know that their collective experiences combine to make the reality they live in. In the words of Cole and Pullen, the mindset of old schooling does not fit with the logic of new media. This is about to get a bit Dr. Seussy, so bear with me, but classrooms need to prepare students to enter into a world that speaks the language of design and creation, access, management, integration and collaboration, and finally evaluation, rather than the language of stale regurgitation of the words of others, rote memorization, and the perpetuation of existing systems and norms. End rhyme. But seriously, as Lancashire and Noble describe, if individuals are socialized into a social practice without realizing that it is socially constructed and selective, and that it can be acted on and transformed, they cannot play an active role in changing it. Multiliteracies is about teaching students that their experiences play into the reality they live in, and that they are able and even responsible for impacting it, rather than merely being impacted by it. Now to address the second question, why do you think they are often neglected or underutilized? The main reason I believe this happens is because of the recent push for so-called achievement, as in success that can be demonstrated mathematically on common assessments. Cole and Pullen describe this in the introduction to their text, Multiliteracies in Motion. They are underutilized and undervalued, I think, because this type of teaching is harder to document, quantify, and monitor, and also because it isn't seen as valuable enough in the eyes of education policymakers. Even if teachers believe in the pedagogy behind multiliteracies, they usually don't have the resources or the time to implement this type of teaching because they are too busy preparing students to reiterate information on standardizing. Additionally, these types of tests usually have high stakes attached to them, and there are consequences for not performing on par. It's kind of ironic though, almost like a Chinese finger trap, since the harder students are forced to perform on these tests, the more resistance it seems policymakers face from schools, teachers, parents, and students alike. Perhaps this is because, according to page 85 of A Pedagogy of Multiliteracies, people do not learn anything well unless they are both motivated to learn it and believe that they will be able to use and function with what they are learning in some way that's in their interest. Most of the time, the type of information and skills students must demonstrate on standardized exams is not useful, relevant, or interesting to them, especially because it doesn't often relate to or reflect what they know of life outside of traditional classrooms. Learning that is useful for living in this society, including skills like critical thinking on the basis of power structures, politics, ideology, and values, is not normally reflected within those common assessments, which in and of themselves can be seen as symbols of power and positioning in terms of how the education system works in our country. So though, for instance, recognizing how ideology works and how things are intentionally designed to influence somebody's experiences and their perceptions of the world would be an important skill for students to cultivate, it's not one that's often in the forefront of educators' minds because of the current climate and its stress on the demonstration of achievement and results. Sadly though, as described by the New London Group, lack of understanding of these types of symbolic meanings are what can negatively impact one's ability to access employment, political power, and cultural recognition. This is a totally different kind of literacy than mere reading and writing, and yet it should be weighted with equal importance in the classroom. One last reason why multiliteracies might not be incorporated into schools the way they could or should be has less to do with school systems and more to do with educators, particularly older ones. Not to make blanket statements that overgeneralize veteran teachers, but technology is evolving so rapidly that unless someone is dedicated to keeping up with it, only those who have grown up with the power of computers and the internet at their fingertips truly speak its language fluently. This means that older teachers especially must be willing to learn this new language and shift their pedagogy away from traditional teaching and toward the lens of multiliteracies. They also have to be willing to accept that many of their students might be more knowledgeable when it comes to certain technologies and ideas than they are, need to become facilitators of knowledge rather than keepers of it, moving away from that banking or empty vessel model of education. So I hope that this multimodal response journal effectively addressed the questions of why it might be so important to address multiliteracies in the classroom and why they are often neglected or underutilized.